Paul called Adam the first man, 1 Corinthians 15:45. Adam had Seth when he was 100 years old, but he also had other sons and daughters. We have the name one. First one was Cain, the second one name was Abel, probably the second born too. Cain was definitely the firstborn. He was asked, where did Cain get his wife? And he said, from his sister, of course. This inbreeding depression for Cain and his wife. In fact, I'm not...
Who was Cain's wife? The question that everyone loves to ask. Recently, I reacted to a video of Gary Wayne on the Deep End podcast, and he explains his idea and reasonings. Who in the world did Cain marry? And it's absolutely fascinating. But now we have a completely different idea of who Cain would have married watching this podcast from Creation Ministries International.
The question then can be answered by a logical deduction from the text. And I know that there's been many different people who have tried to answer this question. One of the ways, for example, being that there were maybe other people outside of the Garden of Eden. Therefore, Genesis isn't actually describing the creation of the human race.
But that goes against what the New Testament and the Old Testament say, because as I said, Paul called Adam the first man, 1 Corinthians 15:45. Then also when he's preaching to the Greeks in Acts, he said that all of us were made from one man. Okay, so it's a very clear statement that Adam is the ancestor of everyone else on earth who ever lived. I mean, Luke's gospel traces Jesus via Mary, via David, via Abraham, via Noah to Adam, who is called the son of God, not the son of an ape. Okay, so and it's because of that we all come from Adam that we can be saved through Jesus, our kinsman redeemer, who is related by blood to those whom he redeems, which means he also came from Adam like everyone else did. So without a historical...
I don't mean to stop really fast, but I feel like that was a straw man of people saying just because they think that there could be possibly God created more men than just Adam and Eve, that doesn't mean that they don't think Genesis 1 is not a creation story or a literal creation. So that's something I wanted to point out.
In fact, the gospel message doesn't have much of a foundation.
So the New Testament writers and everybody in the Old Testament all clearly understand that Adam and Eve are the first people. In many ways, it's the basis of all of the problems that we have in the world today and the gospel itself. So that does still leave us asking the question, how could all of humanity have come from these two people?
Well, we see the answer in Genesis 5:4, which says that after Adam had Seth when he was 100 years old, but he also had other sons and daughters. We have the name one. First one was Cain. The second one name was Abel, probably the second born too. Cain was definitely the firstborn. And then you have Seth born 130 years after Adam, okay? But there are other sons and daughters. So from those daughters is where Cain must have picked his wife. There must have been, it's a logical deduction, there must have been brother-sister intermarriage. Even if Cain married a niece, that niece must have come from brother-sister intermarriage. You can't escape it.
Okay, and is this a position that is kind of new, or does this go back at all?
Well, other people besides us have read the Bible. They understand logic. They've made the same deduction as I just did. Like Theodoret, Bishop of Sirius back in the 5th century, he was asked, where did Cain get his wife? And he said, from his sister, of course. And then you have Martin Luther going into a great deal, the father of the Reformation, into detail about how Cain must have married his sister. Then even later, 19th century, these are the great Old Testament commentators, Kyle and Delitzsch, also said that at the beginning there must have been brother-sister marriage. So what I'm saying is nothing new. It's only because of later ideas they want to compromise with the millions of years, or they have an emotional yuck factor about it. So they have these unbiblical ideas of other people around this time of Adam. That is just not acceptable. It's not what the Bible says.
Okay, well, let's address the yuck factor for as you.
Is it not what the Bible says? But the thing is, every person, when they give their illustrations or ideas of what they think happened, they always have to fill in. They always have to fill in an example. Like, the Bible doesn't say that Cain married his sister. You have to fill it in. The Bible doesn't say that. You're filling in something. So you're still doing the same thing, just coming to different conclusions. I'm not saying that's not the case, though. I totally could see Cain marrying his sister. It's not that crazy of a idea from the Bible.
Called it.
Yeah.
There's some objections there, both scientific and then there's also moral objections, and both of those do carry some weight here. So let's start with the scientific issues.
Right, because the moral objection relates to the scientific objection, actually. So the science is the one we need to do first. And the issue comes from why is it a problem today? And that is a bit of elementary genetics I have to explain. And that goes into why God designed sexual reproduction for a lot of creatures. And that's because we are in a cursed world now. God cursed the ground and everything else because Adam sinned. But one of the aspects of that is that we have mutations that are copying mistakes in our genes. Okay, now if we have, not just with humans, but with animals, if you want to spend a fortune in vet bills, get yourself a purebred because they're inbred. If you want to save yourself a fortune, get a mongrel or a bits of everything we say in Australia, okay? That will be much better. The reason is, see, we have two copies of each gene, one from our father, one from our mother. Okay, the thing is we have a mutation in one place, we hopefully have the backup copy from the other parents. And if the parents are different, okay, they've both got mutations, but the mutations are in a different place. Each place where one parent passes on the mutation, the other passes on the backup copy. So the mutation is either blocked completely or it's mitigated somewhat. Okay, so the child or the doggy or whatever you have is somewhat protected, okay? The problem is if you...
That's funny. That's why I married a Venezuelan, completely different genetics.
Someone close to you, or like purebreds are pretty closely related, they'll have mutations in the same place. So it means at any one location, they've both got a mutation and both got a backup copy. There's a 1 in 4 chance that the mutation will be passed on to the offspring. And considering we have so many mutations, there's a good chance that some mutations from somewhere, the poor child or poor puppy will get both copies of the mutated gene and therefore will actually be a mutant. Okay, so that's the problem with close intermarriage today.
Yeah. So basically, if I'm understanding you right, if you have close intermarriage between people who are closely related, and I think of some of the royal dynasties of Europe, like the Habsburgs.
Go further back to Egypt too, yeah?
Yeah, you have an increased likelihood of that mutation being expressed and that person or animal's quality of life being significantly lowered.
This is a phenomenon called inbreeding depression, okay? But what you need for inbreeding depression is mutations.
Got it. Well, so that, of course, we have to ask the question, why wasn't this a problem for Adam and Eve's children?
Again, it goes back to the creation and the goodness of God. Now, God said 7 times in Genesis 1 that the world was good. And the 7th time he said it was very good. So those 7 goods culminating in very good. He's telling us there's nothing wrong in his finished creation. Now, a mutation is defined as a copying mistake. So
I don't know why, but I just see so many flaws within his arguments. It could be totally right, but also I could see it you said that God cursed the world, so there would already be a cursed genetics, right? Or no, you're just saying Adam and Eve. No, they weren't cursed, but they were. They died. So why wouldn't they have the same defects as us? I know they lived longer, so maybe it took more time. Interesting.
Saying that Adam and Eve had mutations, say that God made mistakes when he created them. I don't believe that. It's not, doesn't gel with his goodness. So God would have created Adam and Eve without any deleterious or harmful mutations. And now 1 generation on, there'll be hardly any harmful mutations in Cain and his sister wife either. So therefore, without mutations, inbreeding depression is a non-issue.
Okay, so it wouldn't have been an issue for Adam and Eve, but later on, there is a similar problem also in Genesis. Following the flood, of course, the earth and all living things that weren't on the ark are destroyed, and humanity has to restart from a population of 8 people.
Yes.
Would inbreeding depression have been a problem for them?
Well, it might have been, but remember, even Noah lived 950 years, okay? So all the lifespans before the flood were enormous, which I think means that mutational load was not too big. That's why they could live so long. Now, the problem is Noah is a very old father. He's 500 years old when he had his first, which was Japheth, and so a bit older when he had Shem, 502 or 3, older still when he had Canaan. So the problem is when fathers are older, their own reproductive cells accumulate more mutations and they get passed on to the child, which I think is the main reason why Shem's lifespan was only 600. So a big drop from Noah's 950. That's the main reason for Shem's lifespan drop, I think.
I don't know why I'm picking this apart. I don't mean to, but I'm just trying to put on just different opinions. I would say the reason why is because after the flood, I would say that's when the earth completely changed. The earth's atmosphere, the oxygen levels changed. That's a good possibility as well.
Another thing to understand is that people who study population genetics realize there can be a problem. So they talk about population bottleneck. Okay, bottle wide here, then it necks out the narrow. So you say population's big here, becomes small.
Right, yeah.
Now, if the bottleneck is prolonged, then inbreeding depression is a huge problem. That's why, the conservationists are worried about species number getting too low because of the inbreeding depression problem. Now, the problem is the dominant model for human evolution is called the out of Africa model, and that postulates a very long bottleneck that humanity went through. But now we know from various people like the evolutionist Kondrashov, and you have John Sanford on the creationist side, have shown that mutation rate is much bigger than they hoped, and therefore such a population bottleneck would have made us extinct.
Yeah.
Now, when the population recovers really quickly from a bottleneck, like it definitely did at the flood, inbreeding depression is a much lower problem. And in fact, not much genetic diversity is lost if the population recovers really quickly from that bottleneck. And that's what you would have had at the flood, a very rapid recovery from the bottleneck. And Dr. Carter has done a lot of work on the post-flood human population.
Right. And so as the population gets bigger, it actually encourages more genetic diversity. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it means that if you've got a small population, there's a big chance that you'll have a lot of the offspring will have that problem with the two mutations coming together. But if the population expands, then you'll get enough of the population without too many of those things happening. So, and the unfortunate ones where it does happen, well, they will often lose out in the struggle. But the population as a whole will survive and thrive if it can recover quickly enough from the population bottleneck. This is well known.
Okay, yeah. Well, and before we started filming, you talked about a couple of case studies in population bottlenecks that they were followed up by rapid population growth.
Yeah, I think these studies actually shed some.
Yeah, this is so interesting. I'm sure like a lot of his stuff is pretty fascinating and have reliable sources.
Right onto why it wouldn't have been a problem, this inbreeding depression for Cain and his wife. In fact, I'm not from this country originally. I'm a citizen of America now, but I collect citizenships and passports like you collect stamps. Okay,
Yeah.
I've got New Zealand and Australia and America.
Nice.
So back to my other two countries. Australia, we have a well-known rabbit plague problem.
Yeah.
You've got about 200 million rabbits. They do a whole lot of damage to the ground and to the crops and things. They're a pest, okay? But it turns out from fairly recent discoveries that they came from a population of about 24 rabbits that were dropped as a Christmas present. Well, thanks very much. Christmas present, December 1859. That's the year Darwin published his dreadful Origin of Species book, okay? And from that tiny population of 24, that's where we get this all too thriving population of rabbits in Australia. And the reason is they came at the right time because other rabbits didn't do so well but by the time they came, this population came in, the Australians had cleared away a lot of the brush and also shot quite a few of the predators. So the rabbits had no natural enemies and could just go across the continents, and fill it. Okay, so this is proof. Even though the rabbits, of course, would have far more mutations. It's closer to our time, you see. So far more, thousands more years to accumulate mutations, and yet they thrived from a small population because it could explode quickly. And back near New Zealand, the Chatham Islands are near New Zealand, and there was the black robin population had got down to just 2 individuals. Just 2, like Adam and Eve were, but of course far more mutated. But they, careful nurturing, they actually rebuilt the Chatham Island black island population from a single breeding pair.
Yeah.
And the point is called a fortiori, or how much more type argument, is they can do it for mutated black robins and mutated rabbits. Right now, how much more could the population thrive from a pair that had hardly any mutations?
Yeah,
Right.
but how many robins are there now? I think that's interesting. And also, obviously, rabbits can have probably like 7 bunnies per year, and a human at best, 1 year to 2.
That helps to answer another common objection. It's not one that we're getting into as much here, but the question of how could we see such diversity of animals and species if Noah only brought a relatively small selection on the ark?
Well, he says God is the one. God told them the animals will come to you, is what he says, Genesis 6:20, which implies that God is taking care of the selection and the migration of the animals from the ark. People say, well, how did Noah get the animals from Australia and the poles and all that? Well, he didn't have to. They came to him, aside from the fact that there's one pre-flood continent anyway, so it wasn't Australia before the flood. But the thing is, selecting animals with low genetic load, no mutational, very low mutational load, and lots of genetic variety means that lots of varieties could come from that original pair. And it also turns out the ark is ideal for rapid production of varieties.
Okay.
Because there's the prevailing theory is called allopatric speciation, which means you have small and reproductively isolated populations. That's the best way you get varieties quickly, and even new species, which creationists believe in and have done before Darwin's time. Like if you want to get a purebred, what do? You try to stop the purebred from breeding with other things, don't you? You protect it in case it's contaminated by something outside. You try and isolate it. But the mountainous regions of Ararat would provide a natural isolation barrier. So you can imagine these populations exploding from the initial ark animals and then spreading and becoming reproductively isolated because of the mountainous regions. That would produce varieties really quickly. So the ark landed in an ideal place for rapid production of variations.
Right. So what we see then is we have evidence, clear evidence that we've been able to observe and record that species can come from relatively small numbers of organisms, even a single breeding pair, and that the ark really does represent an ideal situation for that to naturally come about without human interference.
Exactly, yeah.
If you're enjoying this interview so far, you might be interested to know that we also produce the world's most widely read. So, let's keep.
That's interesting. I would love to look at that study for the robins and see how they're doing. Island black robin. Okay, here it is. The island black robin is the bird species that was almost extinct until just 2 breeding individuals remained in 1980. The population of this New Zealand bird dropped to only 5 individuals, including a single breeding pair. So how many are there now? As of 2025, island black robin is 445 robin birds. Okay, 1980. So that's from 1980 to 445. That's pretty good. It's not like a massive number, but it's interesting.
Forward through biblical history, was inbreeding depression a problem around Babel?
Well, it's interesting. Babel, or Babel, as it should be pronounced in most of the world. Okay. Okay, so we have this division at Babel. They were trying to build a stupid tower to reach the heavens, and God sort of mocks them by saying, well, I have to come down to see what's going on there. So it's a totally puny thing. So it's actually a mockery, the whole thing. But since they disobeyed his command to fill the earth, he forced them to fill the earth by confusing their languages. And in Genesis 10, you see the result of it. 70 nations produce, and of course the Hebrew nation was the 70th. I think the Hebrew nation was the 70th, okay, because God decided he's only going to work with that one nation. Okay, so you have this happening in the days of Peleg, because in the days of Peleg, the earth was divided. Now, chop out the chapter and verse numbers, and a few verses down, you'll see the earth that was divided was the earth that had one language and one speech.
Okay.
That
So it's talking
provides
about people.
It's talking about people, yeah. But because people put chapter numbers, and you might miss that connection there, even though it's very close to it. Okay. But then you look also, Peleg had about half the lifespan of his father Eber. So that division seemed to cause a big lifespan drop. So that may have been small populations, and maybe inbreeding depression did have a part to play in that sharp drop of lifespan. So yeah, that was an issue.
Okay. Well, and then moving forward, after Babel, but we're still in Genesis very early on. Abraham, he married his half sister. So did that cause any issues, and we're about to get into like the moral questions here as well,
because that was a covenant marriage. I mean, God clearly blessed that marriage. He blessed the child from that marriage. I mean, he made it very clear that his covenant will be fulfilled in Isaac, not in Ishmael, the child of the slave girl, or in the children of Keturah. It was only that marriage that God really made the covenant marriage, and that was a half brother, half-sister marriage. So clearly it wasn't immoral at the time. It may not have been too much inbreeding depression at the time, because it's still fairly close to creation, about 2,000 years from creation. They're still living to well past our lifespan. Okay, so God blessed that marriage, from which the Jewish people came from, okay, and which means the Messiah came from there.
Yeah.
And the Jewish people are the ones who wrote the books of the Bible, the oracles of God. Mm-hmm. And even today, the Jewish people, 0.2% of the population, about a third of the Nobel Prize, a third of the world chess champions, okay, from 0.2% of the population. I think they're not a cursed race somehow. Anti-Semites, it's just out of luck there. Not going to happen.
I would love to know what you guys think in the description below. It very well could be just exactly how that doctor explained it. But also, I see that there's room for different interpretations. At the end of the day, that's what I believe. There could be different things going on, maybe completely out of context compared to what we maybe think about in our 21st century minds. At the end of the day, a relationship with Jesus is the most important thing. We need to have a relationship with Jesus and put our faith and trust in him. By grace through faith, we are saved, not by works, so that no man can boast. So I encourage you to go to Jesus today. Seek to have a relationship with him more than ever before. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I encourage you to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subscribers by the end of the year, and I know we can do it with your help. So thank you so much for all the love and support. Have an amazing day, and God bless.